On that day, my husband's white moonlight and I were involved in a car accident simultaneously. My husband, the director of the emergency department, personally pushed his white moonlight into the operating room on the day of the accident, leaving me in a pool of blood. He said, "I am a doctor and can hold on." Therefore, he saved his white moonlight first. Now that I can truly hold on, he no longer has the right to approach me. I heard the sound of bones shattering. In that instant, I didn't even have time to scream. The passenger seat was entirely twisted and deformed from the impact, and by the time the airbag deployed, I was already pinned dead in the seat. Blood gushed from the rupture in my abdomen, warm and sticky, as if pouring directly from my internal organs. Vivian collapsed in the back seat, her head hitting the window, crying hysterically, "It hurts so much. Adrian. Adrian." Someone was calling for help. Others said, "It's his wife, it's Evelyn, she's bleeding." Until I was pushed into the emergency corridor, blood dripped from the stretcher all the way, forming a line. I heard someone shouting loudly, "Trauma team. 2 severely injured females, must arrange immediate rescue, one is Director Adrian's spouse, Evelyn." The crowd suddenly fell silent for a moment. Then everyone looked in one direction. Adrian arrived. His white coat billowing, mask hanging by his ear, eyes as cold and sharp as a knife. When I saw him, my heart suddenly leaped. Even though I was covered in injuries and my vision was blurring, I thought at that moment, he would rush toward me. But his first glance was at her. Vivian. In a coma, yet tightly furrowing her brows, murmuring softly, "It hurts so much." Preliminary diagnosis: Vivian suspected concussion, rib fractures, unstable consciousness. Evelyn abdominal laceration, massive hemorrhage, unstable respiration, dropping blood pressure. An intern doctor said, "Director Adrian, according to blood pressure priority, Evelyn. Push Vivian in first." Adrian's voice interrupted everyone. The scene froze. Some faces changed color, some opened their mouths wanting to say something, but were suppressed by Adrian's words, "I am the highest command in this rescue, follow my orders." But the intern's voice trembled, "If Evelyn waits any longer, she might go into shock. She is a doctor, she can hold on." Adrian's tone was calm, as if describing the risk assessment of a routine surgery. "If Vivian remains in coma for too long, postoperative recovery difficulty will multiply, affecting the nervous system." 1 second, 2 seconds. Everyone fell silent. I heard my own blood dripping one by one onto the stretcher, making pat, pat sounds. My heartbeat slowed and lightened along with the blood flow, but my ears were unprecedentedly clear. I heard everyone dare not speak. I heard the 4 words "Evelyn can hold on," smashing into my chest like a hammer. Then I saw. He turned around, personally pushing Vivian into the emergency room, his movements as gentle as holding some fragile treasure. The nurse hesitated while pressing a hemostatic bag on my chest, her face pale. "Sorry, Evelyn, wait a little longer." "Wait. You all make me wait again. But this time, it's not waiting for someone to get off work, not waiting for a phone call. It's waiting for a decision, waiting for a life, waiting for my husband to choose whose life he loves. And he has already chosen. Not me." 10 minutes later, a new emergency doctor arrived and pushed me into another operating room. When I was placed on the operating table, I heard him over there saying to Vivian, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." I really wanted to laugh. He was indeed there, just not by my side. I woke up in excruciating pain after the anesthesia. Waves of twisting pain came from the abdominal suture site, every breath felt like someone was tearing at my internal wounds with a knife. My eyelids were heavy, hair sticky, my whole body felt like it had crawled back from hell. It took me a full 2 minutes to focus my eyes and clearly see the clock hanging above the incandescent lamp. 4 hours had passed since I was pushed into the operating room. I was still alive. But I didn't know why I was alive. Outside the curtain, someone was speaking softly. "Vivian has been transferred to the ICU now. Director Adrian is still by her side, personally writing the nursing records overnight. He's really different toward Vivian now. I heard she was his former fiancée, later the engagement was broken off. Sigh, what about Evelyn? Aren't they not divorced yet? Keep your voice down, she's right inside. I moved my fingertips and found a needle still inserted in my left hand, the 4-bottle half empty. The nurse happened to come in, saw I was awake, and said in surprise, Evelyn, you're awake? I'll call someone for rounds right away. I didn't speak. While helping me change the dressing, she cautiously asked, Director Adrian doesn't know you're awake yet. Should I notify him? I turned my head and looked at her. She was stunned for a moment, then bit her lip, I understand. She retreated out, her footsteps much lighter than when she came in, as if afraid to disturb something. I closed my eyes, but tears suddenly burst forth. Not for the surgical wound, not for that 10-minute wait. It was because I suddenly realized that in this world, no one would think he should come to see me anymore. I was once the woman who made him put down the emergency table and rush to me at the end of the corridor. We dated for 6 years, married for 3. 9 years had almost exhausted all my patience and passion. I accommodated his inverted work schedule, holiday overtime, all-night surgeries. Every time he came home, I prepared hot meals and soup for him. I accompanied him through promotion failures, through medical disputes. He said I was his only family in this lifetime. But at that fork in the emergency corridor, he decided in just 2 seconds. Save others first. I remembered our first year of marriage. We agreed to go out for a meal. He worked overtime in the operating room for 6 hours, finally sending, order takeout, don't wait. While eating the cold rice bowl, I comforted myself, he's saving lives. In the 2nd year, on my birthday, he was on night shift. I went to the hospital to find him, bringing a cake. He happened to be guiding Vivian on suturing, frowned and glanced at me. What are you doing running around in the surgical area? Disrupting order. I froze in place and put the cake on the nurse's station at the end of the corridor. That early morning, I walked home alone. The weather was cold, but my feet had no sensation. In the 3rd year, I had a high fever of 40 degrees, shivering as I called him. He said, Vivian is insomniac tonight, I'll chat with her for a bit, drink more hot water. I didn't realize then that I had always been waiting outside the ward for him to turn back, while Vivian was always on the operating table. I struggled to turn over, the wound pulling until I almost suffocated, but finally fished out that envelope from my bag. The divorce agreement had been drafted long ago. I was just waiting for him to make a complete mistake to let me give up hope. Unexpectedly, he gave this mistake so decisively. 10 minutes are enough to decide the life and death of a surgery, and also enough to end a marriage. I originally thought I was lucky. At least, I was still alive. But it wasn't until that late night that I understood living doesn't mean having been saved. On the 2nd night post-surgery, as the anesthetic wore off, I was in pain nearly to the point of fainting. Only I was left in the ward. The call button on the wall failed due to aging wiring. I pressed it 3 times, but no one came. The 4-bottle above my head was empty, blood refluxing, my entire arm throbbing in pain. I mustered all my strength to sit up, but my vision blackened in waves. I feared if I fell asleep again, I wouldn't wake up. Just as I finally propped up my upper body and tried to get out of bed to find someone, the door was suddenly pushed open. A man covered in dust, with scratches on his cheek, burst in and froze. Why are you still here? I struggled to turn my head and recognized him as Jason, the surgical intern on duty that day. He rushed to my bedside in a few steps, saw the bruised needle marks on my arm and the nearly deflated 4-bottle, his face changing instantly. Why is no one attending to you? In your condition, you absolutely cannot get up on your own. He slammed the emergency call. This is a sign of postoperative concurrent infection. I opened my mouth, wanting to say something, but he was already about to explode. Several on-duty nurses rushed in upon hearing. Dr. Jason, it's not that we don't care. Director Adrian ordered no outsiders in this area, saying Vivian needs a quiet environment, fearing media. Jason turned sharply, his voice raised for the first time echoing through the ward. Then what about her? She's not an outsider? She's a patient. A doctor's wife, a person just off the knife. She's not medical waste, she's a living person. She's Evelyn. The nurses looked at each other. The atmosphere froze for a moment. Jason looked at me. At that moment, his eyes held not guilt, but fury. If they dare not save you, then I will. That night, Jason almost half-carried, half-lifted me to the infectious diseases department for re-examination, personally changing dressings and needles, without closing his eyes for a full 4 hours. I was so weak I could barely speak, yet I firmly remembered one action. Before injecting me, he carefully avoided the wound near my bruised hand back, then softly asked, "Will it hurt here?" I was stunned. I hadn't heard this question in a long time. Previously, when Adrian injected or bandaged me, it was always straightforward, precise, and efficient, with a doctor's skilled calm. But I never saw the word pain in his eyes. I thought I was really tolerant, really able to hold on. Until this intern doctor cautiously said to me, "It's okay, take it slow." I then realized I wasn't unafraid of pain. No one had ever asked if it hurt. When Jason tucked me in and prepared to leave, I finally spoke. "Thank you." He was stunned. I looked at him, struggling to curl my lips. "Adrian is a doctor, but you are a human." On the afternoon of the third day, the ward door finally opened again. It was him. Adrian. Wearing a white coat, buttons neatly fastened, mask pulled down to his chin, shoulders stained with a few strands of blood, unknown from which patient. He carried a bottle of mineral water and a pack of energy biscuits in his hand. The moment he walked in, I heard my heartbeat make a bang in my chest. Even though I had signed the divorce agreement, even though I had convinced myself to let go, I still couldn't control my instinctive reaction. I struggled to sit up, pulled the blanket, trying to make my voice sound calm. "Why are you here?" He glanced at me, his eyes devoid of warmth, as if confirming if a case was still alive. "Passing by on rounds," he said. "Passing by." I gently inhaled, a chill in my nasal cavity. He walked to my bedside, placed the mineral water on the nightstand, and put down the biscuits too. "You haven't eaten for days, replenish some energy." His tone was unhurried, like explaining pathology to an intern. I looked at that bottle of water. It was a common supermarket brand, different from what I was used to drinking before hospitalization. But I knew that wasn't the point. The point was, the hand offering the water was a clean and efficient medical hand, one that had saved countless lives. And at this moment, this hand before me was like a heavy block of ice. I didn't take the water. He frowned. "Why, not drinking?" I slowly said, "I'm not thirsty." His tone suddenly sank a bit. "Don't be pretentious. Postoperative dehydration, the doctors have instructed you to hydrate more." I looked up at him. "Do you think that as long as I wake up, I'm still the old Evelyn?" He was stunned for a moment, a slight impatience surfacing in his eyes. I suddenly smiled. Not a mocking smile, but one of finally seeing clearly, finally recognizing. "On your way here, you went to Vivian's ward first, right?" I asked. He didn't deny it, just said, "Her postoperative emotions are unstable, I have to soothe her." "What about me?" I looked at him, enunciating each word. "When my life was hanging by a thread, you made me wait 10 minutes, I've regained consciousness for 3 days, and you haven't said a word. Now you come, but first soothe her, then check on me on the way. Why not be straightforward and write the 4 words, 'She is more important,' directly on my bed card?" Adrian's brows furrowed tighter, his voice carrying obvious reproach. "Evelyn, don't make a fuss." "Me making a fuss?" I gazed at him, my throat as if blocked by something, unable to make a sound, only emitting faint cold laughs. I reached out, pushed the bottle to the bed edge. With a snap, it fell to the ground, the cap smashing open, water flowing everywhere. The entire ward suddenly became terrifyingly quiet. Adrian's face instantly darkened to the extreme. "Do you know how busy I am now? Do you think I have time to play emotions with you?" I said softly, "Yes, Vivian's emotions are worth more than my life for you to spare 10 minutes. He seemed enraged by me, raising his voice. "She is my former fiancée, a martyr survivor. Can't you think from another angle?" Her psychological state has always been poor. Secondary stress is the responsibility of our entire department. What about me? I said calmly, I am your wife. He was stunned. I was once your wife. I lifted the blanket, exposing the abdominal wound not yet with sutures removed, pointing to the densely stitched scar. This is the life I fought for myself, not given by you. You chose her, it's okay, I saved myself. But don't come again, don't pretend to care, don't stand by my bed pretending to be human. He stood there dazed, speechless for a long while. I gazed at him, those eyes that once made me think I could rely on the whole world, now only hypocrisy and arrogance remained. I said softly, Adrian, let's end here. You've saved so many people, but never saved me once. I carried the divorce agreement with me for a full 3 days. I read it 7 times in total, recognizing every word, understanding every clause. Finally, under the name column, I signed my own name. Jason was my witness. I could have found a lawyer, but I don't know why, when my head was dizzy, the first person I thought of was him. Are you willing to help me with this? I asked him then. Jason was stunned for a moment, then nodded. Not helping you, accompanying you. He accompanied me to the lawyer's office, to the hospital administration building, submitted copies of our marriage registration, stamped, signed. The procedures were completed 10 minutes faster than I imagined. Yes, still 10 minutes. This time I learned to be smart. I don't wait for anyone, I save myself. When Jason pushed the wheelchair to take me away, the sunlight was great. A car was parked downstairs, driven by his friend. When I sat in the passenger seat, I heard familiar footsteps from upstairs. Someone hurried from the end of the corridor, with a bit of inertial panting. I didn't turn back. Jason closed the car door for me. Then I heard someone shout my name, Evelyn. I instinctively wanted to turn, but controlled myself. Jason fastened my seatbelt for me, softly saying in my ear, you don't need to look back anymore. The moment the car started, something in my heart broke, light and crisp. On the other side, Adrian stood downstairs from the hospital ward, blankly watching the car gradually driving away. His hand was still in the white coat pocket, clutching the mineral water bottle cap that I had dropped. Why did she leave? He asked a passing young nurse. The young nurse looked at him with a strange expression. Evelyn handled discharge in the morning, and the divorce procedures were sent in the afternoon. Dr. Jason accompanied her. Adrian stood in place, silent. He lowered his head looking at the bottle cap, slight sweat seeping from his palm. He returned to the ward. On the windowsill was my medical record book, next to it the divorce agreement, his copy, left for him to sign. There was only one sentence on it, may you never hesitate to save everyone in the future, but don't forget that I was once a person too. After I left the hospital, I thought we would meet again. But 3 days passed, no news. On the afternoon of the 4th day, as I exited the free clinic site and was about to get into Jason's car, he suddenly rushed out and grabbed my wrist. His hand was ice cold, knuckles pale, much like the hand that once gripped hemostatic forceps at night. Evelyn. I turned my head, my gaze indifferent. Shouldn't you be guarding Vivian's bedside? How do you have time to act in this redemption drama? He didn't speak, just quietly looked at me. That gaze was stranger than silence. After a few seconds, he finally spoke, his voice low and hoarse like shattered glass rubbing in his throat. I went to see her. I sneered, and then? Did she cry again? Or did you buy her stronger anti-anxiety medication? He seemed slapped by my retort, his breathing paused urgently, then slowly spoke. On the 2nd day post-surgery, I wanted to see you, but she suddenly fainted, saying headache, palpitations, couldn't sleep. I believed it, thinking her postoperative stress was too heavy, fearing something happened. I guarded her for 3 full days. On the 3rd night, I had an emergency and needed my notebook, went to her ward. Saw her sitting on the bed binge watching shows, eating chips, smiling sweeter than during the day. When she saw me, she hurriedly hid them, then made excuses. Don't misunderstand, I'm distracting myself. I stood in place, somewhat incredulous. He continued, his voice as if scooped from deep in his chest. I asked her, Vivian, have you been fine all along? She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I asked why. She admitted it, she just didn't want to see me and you together. My breathing paused for half a beat. Adrian's eyes reddened, his gaze about to shatter. At that moment, I felt like struck by lightning. Looking at her face, I suddenly remembered many things. Previously, she deliberately pulled me to her house on your birthday night to collapse and get drunk. Previously, she sent me long texts saying you forced her to resign. Previously, she said you were emotionally unstable, possibly with anxiety disorder. I actually believed it all. I thought she was sensitive, fragile, needing care. I thought you were too calm, too rational, not understanding empathy. I thought I was always helping others. In the end, I was the one being led by the nose. She wasn't sick. The sick one is my pair of eyes that can't see people clearly, yet think themselves the most rational. I misjudged the person, gave life to someone acting in front of me. Yet left the one truly bleeding in the car accident waiting for me 10 minutes in the emergency corridor. His Adam's apple rolled, hoarsely saying, You asked why I came to find you. It's because I was wrong. I didn't speak. Wind blew through the parking lot, rolling up flyers on the ground. Jason stood not far away, silent, only gently sighing to block the wind behind me. Adrian looked at me, his eyes holding pain, nearly pleading. Evelyn, can we start over? Whatever you want, I'll give it to you. I looked up, my voice calm to the point of ruthlessness. What I wanted, you wouldn't give even 10 minutes. Now what right do you have to ask if I still want to turn back? He was stunned. I slowly withdrew my wrist, looking at him enunciating, I think it's pretty good now, Director Adrian. He couldn't say what was wrong, but he should have heard that I didn't call his name anymore. Can we talk? He probed. Not now. I lowered my head to check my watch. There's 10 minutes until rehabilitation class. I need to prepare equipment for the children. He asked again, then, evening? Evening, I need to set up materials for tomorrow's free clinic. I smiled, been quite busy lately. I didn't say sorry, because I didn't feel I owed him. He stood there like a patient in the wrong department. I suddenly reached into the car for a bottle of water and handed it to him. Hard work on the road, hot weather, drink some. I paused. He took it. The moment his fingers brushed my fingertip, I neither shrank nor lingered. Just quietly, politely smiled. He wanted to say something, but I spoke first. Thank you for coming to see me today. I saw the light in his eyes suddenly dim. Not because I thanked him, but because when I said it, like to a stranger. He didn't speak again, just looked at me. I turned to get in the car. The instant my back was to him, I heard my heartbeat very calm. Turns out, for someone you no longer love, you can really do without even needing to evade. He came later than I imagined, yet less important than I thought. Previously, I longed for him to come, longed so that my heartbeat dared not stop. Now he's here, I just want to say, thank you, please leave. I never thought Adrian would grab me in front of everyone, even less that he would say in one breath downstairs from the emergency building, Evelyn, I'm sorry. His voice was loud enough that the entire corridor stopped in their tracks. I was still carrying the rehabilitation materials bag, with Jason's jacket over my shoulders that he held for me, just about to enter the elevator with him, when Adrian called me. My footsteps didn't stop. Jason reacted quickly, holding the elevator door for me. I didn't turn, just softly said, if there's something, you can send WeChat. Adrian walked over, stood in front of me, his gaze unexpectedly looking in, without the former certainty and arrogance. I came to pick you up home, he said. I smiled. Not a sarcastic smile, but one of astonishment. How could you say such words? I don't have a home anymore. I looked at him. Didn't you sign last month? His breathing hitched, as if struck by this sentence. I thought, there was still a chance between us. Director Adrian. I softly interrupted him. Don't say us. The day you pushed me aside, I died once. Later I found that if no one comes, I can only climb up myself. His eyes gradually reddened, voice lowering. I know I judged wrong then, but I really didn't mean to hurt you. I thought you could wait. I really thought you were fine. I shook my head. You thought I could hold on, so you didn't save me. You thought I wouldn't leave, so you didn't coax me. You thought I loved you to the bone, so you always treated me like an urn. When I spoke, Jason didn't make a sound, just stood half a step away by my side, like a silent guardrail. Adrian looked at him, then back at me. Suddenly his voice tightened. So are you with him now? I looked at him, didn't answer. I didn't want to prove anything with "we're not like that." Because he once said during my high fever, "Vivian and I have nothing." But later, he chose her. I only said one sentence, "Don't want to know who I'm with, because you're no longer an option." The elevator came, Jason pushed me in. Adrian stood in place, like an unsaved casualty, slowly squatting down. I heard him suppress his voice calling me, "Evelyn, don't go." I didn't turn back. Because I was already walking my own path. At the internal training meeting of Decon Hospital, I stood on the podium, publicly discussing ethics of medical personnel emergency rescue choices for the first time. The topic was originally set by Jason. I was just there for supplementary case analysis. But I don't know who added the car accident I experienced. The on-site academic discussion suddenly gained some subtlety. I could see some were waiting for me to mention Adrian. I didn't. I just used a calm timeline to present the case of who to save first on the PPT. Then, I said, each of you will encounter such choices in the future. I don't blame anyone, but I won't let anyone define me as can be sacrificed. After speaking, the venue was quiet for a while, then applause rang out. Some were genuinely agreeing, others encouraging out of awkwardness. Only Adrian, standing in the last row, never sat down throughout, never clapped. After the meeting adjourned, he caught up to me. "Do you really not blame me?" he asked. I somewhat read. I did blame. I said. But I blame myself more. Blame me for pinning hopes on you, thinking you would make an exception for me once. He lowered his head, as if harshly slapped. I can clarify that you weren't abandoned then. He said, I prepared to explain the judgment logic at the time in the next industry seminar, to protect you. I smiled. Really smiled. Adrian, you still don't understand. I don't need your protection. He was stunned. I looked at him, tone calm without a ripple. It's not that I don't forgive you, it's that I don't want to depend on you anymore. I can speak for myself, shine for myself, don't stand up for me again, because you're no longer the person behind me. He looked at me as if recognizing me for the first time. Previously, I always retreated behind him, softly supplementing cases, handing tissues, coordinating his impatient patients. Now, I stand on stage, voice steady, logic clear, surrounded by young doctors wanting to exchange. Their gaze at me is no longer Mrs. Adrian, but Evelyn. He suddenly asked softly, "Do you really not love me anymore?" I was stunned for a second, then shook my head. I don't know. I said. I only know, I no longer want to look back. The year-end gala of Decon Hospital is the stage all medical staff await. Lights, applause, awards, laughter. I had sat in the audience countless times, watching him on stage receiving awards, accepting the admiration of the whole audience. Then I thought, me looking up at him from below was rightful happiness. Now, I sit in the corner, watching him slowly walk onto the stage. He was the last to receive an award today, the Special Honor Contribution Award. But he didn't follow the script to accept. He stood under the lights, microphone in hand, gazing at the crowd. His gaze scanned inch by inch over the crowd, finally fixing on me. Then he said this, "If you allow me, I want to give this award to one person." I instantly heard the whole audience quiet down. The air was so quiet it almost echoed. He took a deep breath and said, "Evelyn, I'm sorry. Are you still willing to look back at me?" In that instant, I heard gasps from the crowd, whispers, the head nurse covering her mouth in exclamation. All lights focused on me. I sat in the sixth row by the side, wearing the most ordinary work uniform, hair tied in a loose ponytail, still holding a paper cupcake just used for photos. I put down the cake, stood up, walked to the front of the stage. Not to respond. To end this performance. I walked to the microphone, picked it up, voice steady, "Thank you, Director Adrian. But this award, I don't deserve. I'm not the one silently supporting you behind, nor some sensible to the extreme heroic lover. I'm just, on the day you turned away, almost." Adrian's face paled, wanted to grab the mic. I turned my head to avoid. "You treat me as a stage persona, but I'm just one waiting for you to say but abandoned by you." I finished, put down the mic, turned and walked off stage. Jason stood at the passage entrance, looking at me, silent, only gently pulling aside the curtain. The instant I stepped out, no one in the audience dared applaud. Adrian still stood on stage, eyes red, gripping that trophy, yet like holding a hot iron. On the night the annual meeting ended, I received a private message from the dean's office. "He wants to invite you for a cup of tea." I replied 3 words, "Not necessary." I didn't attend the post-annual meeting dinner. Nor did I handle the media speculation about my counterattack on Dr. Husband. I didn't want to whitewash, nor tear apart. I just wanted to leave. But before leaving the hospital, he blocked me in the parking lot. Adrian, wearing that award-receiving dark gray suit, shirt impeccable, face pale like excessive blood loss. He didn't say a word, just stared at me with a gaze so strange it chilled me. "Are you satisfied now?" he asked softly. "Have you been waiting for this stage all along?" I looked up at him, really, for the first time feeling this person was no longer familiar. I softly said, "Adrian, why do you always think I'm acting? From beginning to end, only you were performing." His breathing became rapid, fingers slightly trembling. "You wouldn't speak like this before. You used to fear most embarrassing me, fear me losing face. You've changed." I looked at him, nodded. "Yes, I've changed. Before, I dared not cry, fearing you'd think me emotional. Later I dared cry, because I still had expectations. Now I don't cry, because to me, you're no longer important." He stepped forward, grabbed my wrist. "Do you really want to cut clean like this? Evelyn, do you really not soften at all?" I stared at his hand. He thought I'd dodge like in the past, or stiffen. But I didn't. I quietly stared at his hand, then faintly said, "Let go. You're hurting me." In that instant, I saw his gaze collapse. Not anger, not shame, but thorough panic. He let go, stepped back, lips pale. "You even tell others it hurts," he said. "Before, you dared not even let me hear you cry. Have you long not needed me?" I looked at him, suddenly smiled. "Yes. Before, I dared not cry because I treated him as a god, fearing his impatience, fearing his disappointment. Now I finally understand what truly hurt me wasn't the surgical wound, wasn't the car accident fracture, but that 10 minutes when he turned and walked away. At that moment, a complete me died. That day was the last joint-free clinic before Dekong Hospital's relocation. I was one of the invited speakers. When stepping down, I almost fell at the step entrance. Before I could steady, someone suddenly rushed out beside me and supported me. I was stunned, looked up, it was him. Adrian. He was thinner than last meeting, dark circles, lips almost bloodless, voice hoarse unlike him. "Are you okay?" I withdrew my hand. "I can stand steady." He lowered his head, "Sorry." I didn't let him finish. "If you're going to say sorry again, better not say it." He was silent for a long time, as if brewing his last breath. "Evelyn, can you not take another step forward? I can't keep up." I turned my head, looked at him, quietly asked, "Do you remember what you said then?" "You said, 'She is more dangerous, I can hold on.' Now I say one to you." I paused, softly enunciating, "You can hold on too, so I'm leaving." I left. He didn't chase. Perhaps weak legs, perhaps fearing rejection again. But whether he chases or not, I won't look back. A few days later, I heard he took leave, went to another province to support a medical team for a month and a half. Later, someone said he resigned as director, transferred to the post-trauma psychological counseling group. After that, I received a letter. No signature, but the handwriting I recognized at a glance. It was him. The content only one sentence: "You said you no longer need me. But I finally understand, I was always the one needing you." I didn't reply. Not that I didn't want to, but no need. He once said I could hold on, so he saved others first. Now I can really hold on, so he no longer has the right to approach me.